Steve McKevitt. Steve, I think you're an expert in marketing, communications, and branding. You've worked for you founded several highly successful businesses, and you've worked with people such as Atari and BT and Coca-Cola and Deutsche Bank. Can I ask you, do you think these smaller businesses in our region, make up a large number of them, are able to weather the changing markets that we're facing at the moment?
I think in the sector that my company operates in, which is creative and marketing services, the small, flexible businesses are the ones who are performing the best during the downturn. The market for marketing and creative services in the region has traditionally been dominated by public sector contracts and by a small number of large regional companies that support, like John West or DFS, that used regional suppliers of creative content, advertisers, advertising agencies, design agencies, PR agencies, and so on. What we've seen really is that, firstly, that public sector source of money, that ship has sailed and sunk, and quite a few of the big companies have moved their accounts to London. So the big companies in the sector, and they're not huge, they tend to be quite small, have downsized significantly or really had to look at what they're doing and where the client base has come from. Golden, the company that I'm a partner in, like Steve, 80% of our work comes from overseas, from Europe and the US, and really our experience of the marine sector has been very positive, high growth, high margin, and what we found is that the good companies who are competing for contracts overseas are finding that actually being based in Leeds, Nike don't really know where Leeds is, don't really care, but they haven't got the prejudice that UK companies have to a regionally based creative agency. The same goes for web design or filmmaking, and it's really that's the opportunity, I think, is that English is still the international language of business. British creativity is really well respected, and you can often find that it is easier to compete for big contracts with big companies overseas than it is to compete in a small pond with a large number of people for a relatively small public sector contract.
Thank you. Steve Kennedy, what do you think the LEP can do to unlock the potential of some of these smaller businesses that we've been discussing?
I think that I'm going to take this slightly bigger than the LEP, but the LEP's got its part to play. So corporates globally, and what somebody said, there's not a lot of cash. Corporates are holding bundles and oodles of cash right now. They haven't invested, and they need to improve productivity. They've got to lower costs, they've got to innovate, and more than ever, to become competitive globally. But they're going to need business services, because actually one of the things that big organizations are not very good at doing, and the bigger they get, the harder it is for them to do it, is they're not brilliant at innovating. And smaller organizations tend to be much better at innovation. I think some would say that Apple might have broken that, but then I think a lot of what the Apple development has been about has actually been outsourced. So they're going to spend that cash pile, or are they not going to spend that cash pile? And much of it depends how they feel about the prospects for growth, what conditions and environments we can set, and that's government and the LEP through the opportunities that we've got to encourage that growth. Government has a role to play, but so does the culture of the UK as a whole. In 10 years up to this recession, I would say most of us had it pretty good. Yeah, you had average people, sorry if you don't like this message, but average people and average businesses probably doing okay. There was very little polarization. The decade of average is over. Well and truly, it's over. We need more innovation, we need more productivity, and we need people willing to take controlled risks. More than ever, entrepreneurship is vital, and not only for them and their wealth creation, but for the fact that they create jobs. But here's my point about the culture issues, is that because of some of the excessive risk-taking, because of some of those excesses of the past, and that excessive risk-taking was predominantly in the financial services sector, we have created an anti-success message. And we need to stop this. And we need to get belief, confidence, and we need to get entrepreneurs motivated to get back into investing. Or otherwise, we're all doomed to a relentless life of immiserization.
Thank you. I'm very anxious to throw these questions open to the floor. Does anyone have a question right now? If you just hold your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, please. Just introduce yourself and ask who'd like to answer your question.
Thank you very much. It's Paul Stevens from Leeds City Council. It's for the whole panel, actually. There's been a lot of talk, we're obviously talking about rebalancing the economy, and there seems to be a fairly simplistic view in some ways, not from the panel, that manufacturing good, services bad, private good, public bad. But as we've heard, the service sector does export a lot, and as we know, the public sector purchases it a lot from the private sector. And I really want to know, I'd ask the panel, what does it think that rebalancing the economy actually means for the Leeds City region? Thank you.
I'll ask Kirsten to give the first answer.
Okay, I mean, it's difficult not to conclude that we have a challenge. If you look at the tables that were shown in the previous session on private consumption, the need for private investment and export, it's difficult not to conclude that we have to focus on that agenda. But I'm absolutely with Stephen here. I think it would be and Paul, I suspect, oversimplistic to say manufacturing good, services bad. Stephen's talked about his business expanding overseas. My son's employed in a service sector working largely now in Africa to open up that market before China gets there, for example. That's the services exporting, creating wealth in this city region. So I think it is oversimplistic. And I think it's not helpful to us either because it characterizes service industries as either parasitic or not adding value. And I think the service industries are neither. And I mean, particularly coming from a service sector, we are part of the supply chain for wealth creation. It's not just that we secure a market from the wealth that's created. So, you know, without the skilled labour force that our schools produce, without the housing that we secure the development of, and the transport networks that we're responsible for, it would be almost impossible to secure some of the wealth creation that we need. So I think that's where I am. I also think when we talk about imbalance in the economy, well, which economy do we need? Do we mean? You know, the city that I'm responsible for has very little land available for major manufacturing sites. We're absolutely exporting our knowledge because we have some of the highest performing skills and world-leading research. That's the nature of our economy. We sit in a city region economy, we sit in a national and a global economy, and it's about getting all those connections. But what's absolutely critical is that we understand the way the markets are moving, and as Stephen's business is moving, and I guess you anticipated this some time ago, Stephen, we absolutely work out where the markets are moving to and get there quick by understanding them at some depth.
If you export those services and that knowledge, does it matter that it's 85-15? Have we really got this desperate need that we have to just get back to making things? It's great that we do. But if it's just making stuff for making stuff's sake so as we can rebalance the economy, what's the point?
Steve?
I think there's a role for both, but what interests me is that I'm curious to know how many people from manufacturing background are actually in here. And I'm not expecting anyone to put their hands up, but I'm from Lancashire, so I can say this with impunity. Yorkshire businesses have a tendency to be parsimonious when it comes to marketing. They spend proportionately much less than the international average. And I think herein lies the problem, because manufacturing is not going to be able to do it on their own. They might be trying to solve it on their own in the room over there. I'm not so sure, but they can't do it on their own. They do need business services, creative services, and marketing services. And the reason for that, I think, is, you know, the economy is dominated by brands. I mean, I guess, you know, we're attracted to the brand, the car that we drive, and really the big successful companies, the big successful brands, they don't sell products. What they sell is concept-based. They sell competing sets of rather nebulous lifestyle choices. If you don't believe me, go and have a look at how many different brands of chemically identical toothpaste are available for sale in the local supermarket. It's about 120. And I think that that, you know, in manufacturing in the region realise that actually branding is important, and certainly in terms of internationalising, you know, taking advantage of the international opportunity that's out there, then more the better. But as I said, 80% of our business is overseas with big brands. We don't do any work in Leeds City region, and part of that is because I think there may well be no demand for it. Well, there should be.
Jane?
What I think is interesting about this argument about should we be doing more manufacturing or be more services-led is that I think in a time of recession, quite naturally, we are more attracted to things that are safe, that are, you know, safe brands. And perhaps that does make manufacturing attractive from one perspective because it's a product, it's something you can see and touch, it's tangible, and there's this comfort factor associated to that, together with the fact that obviously it brings more employment. But I think that what we probably need to be smarter about is the emotional aspect of what we purchase, whether it be a service or a product, or whether we see a service as a product or however. What we're buying is something that is, our perception is that it's doing something for us, it's in business, it's solving a problem. Now that product, that manufactured part, machinery, whatever, might not actually solve the problem. The service might. It's about how smart we need to be positioning it. And I think that goes back to what Stephen was saying about how, you know, we can't be mediocre anymore. We've really got to get sharp and start delivering, whether it is a product or whatever it is that's necessary to make the difference to the individual businesses.
Can I just add, whilst I said when we take our services internationally, we're better at it, we're better knowledgeable with skills, but we don't necessarily have that hunger that we find in a lot of these other international countries. And I know that sounds very trite, but I'm telling you, in many of these countries, in Brazil, Mexico, India, China, these people want what we've taken for granted for a very long time.
Deepak?
I would just simply add that in a resource-constrained environment, there's a cheap trap to fall into, which is to quickly identify what is perceived to be a winner and move quickly towards that winner. And I'm not sure that really helps the debate. I think that earlier we talked, you know, some of the other panelists have been talking about supply chains and value creation. I'd like someone to show me a global manufacturing company that didn't have a vibrant service industry supporting it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't happen. I mean, it's simply not possible. So what we're seeing, at least, you know, even in our program, is we have, like I said, larger than 50% service businesses in our program, but we also have some small-scale manufacturers as well. And it's been fascinating to watch the two groups interact to support each other. And I think that, you know, earlier in the panel we talked about localized supply chains. There's a piece of this for everybody, and if you want to grow the economy, it's impossible to just do it on a manufacturing base alone. I just don't see how that's possible.